These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
Here comes your guardian policeman.
Please do not shoot me. Then listen to my instructions. I'm trying to do it. Don't talk! Listen!
How can you be certain that all of the people killed pose an imminent threat to the United States?
There's no doubt that civilians were killed that shouldn't have been.
In your life, you will interact with many different social institutions. There is one institution that is unlike any other, one where you are subservient to others. From the cradle to the grave, you will be regulated, taxed, controlled, indoctrinated, coerced, judged, and possibly killed at the whims of members of this organization. This institution is called the state.
Well, if we're talking about human history in the largest sense of the word, that is to say, Homo sapiens has been around for 200,000 years. The state was invented only, even at the most charitable estimate, 8,000 years ago. And then it only touched a small portion of mankind. So the fact is that most of human history has been a history of statelessness. If you ask yourself how long people have been ruled by states on a sort of massive level, I ask myself, at what point in history do you imagine that more than half of mankind would have experienced regular tax collection, right? Once a year or something like that. There might be plunder from time to time, right? But irregular, episodic, and the existence of a state in most people's life did not come into being for more than half of mankind until around 1600. If we take the history of mankind as a day, the state comes into being at about 11:30 at night, right? And it becomes hegemonic at sort of 11:40, right? 11:45 or 11:50. And the thing that qualifies this, of course, is that there's a whole lot fewer Homo sapiens around in these early days. Even Western cities until maybe 1800, 1850, never reproduced themselves by their internal population. That is to say, they were so deadly because of typhoid and disease and epidemics and so on, that they killed more people than that is, their population could not grow internally, that all of these cities grew by bringing in more people from the countryside because they had high rates of mortality. The reason the state form has proven so durable and virtually universal is that it takes a state to beat a state. And so if you think of the early states, that is, the early states were all founded in floodplains where you had concentrated agriculture and could concentrate a large population. And that's why they tended to be units that were more powerful militarily than a scattered and fragmented countryside around them. And in fact, they grew by plundering that population, by enclosing that population, of bringing it in, having them plant grain, and capturing people. So I try to show in Against the Grain that most of the wars of these early states were wars of capture in order to grab populations. This is true for the Athenians as well. Grab population, bring them in, have them produce for the center or work in the quarries.
Kingdoms expanded into empires. Dominant kingdoms expanded by conquest, suppressing people in new territories. A hierarchy of governors managed the increasing complexity of empires. A new system appeared in which power was given to the people in the form of votes. Democracy diluted the absolute power of authorities, but introduced demagogues and the tyranny of the majority. Civilization expanded. More decision-making power was delegated. Some political power became subordinated to laws, but delegating power, especially military power, risked a return to empire. Combining features of a democracy with a republic, nations set up basic rights subordinating more political power to the rule of law. Over time, however, special interests found a way to use politics to their advantage.
Within a state, I think it's fair to say that you have got the standard aspects of what we all associate with the state, which is tax collection, a system of centralized punishment and centralized monopoly over violence, so that executions that are legal executions can only be conducted by the state. What's important to sort of recognize is that until starting perhaps with the French Revolution, which was an emancipatory movement, and the idea that people in all of France were governed by the same law no matter who they were everywhere in France, that there were no serfs anymore. You were not under the personal lordship of an aristocrat or of the priestly control. The French Revolution marks that point in which the state comes to see as one of its goals the collective welfare of the people. Notice that the French Revolution did two things. It also made all Frenchmen equal in theory. It took a long time for that to come into practice, especially for women. But it also made everyone directly ruled by the state.
As populations increased, states grew more sophisticated, controlling not just law, taxation, and the military, but eventually education, social services, central banking, and much of the economy. Laws inform citizens what rules the state has decided they will obey. What began as a codification of norms became a way for special interests to control others.
The Protestant Reformation made people, the idea is that everyone can interpret the Bible on their own. So they start thinking of moral decrees from God, and now legal decrees from the state as what's written down on paper and issued by a sovereign. This is the statist way of thinking, and it's not what law used to be until the modern revolution of the modern concept of the state, which is only about 200 or 300 years old, like the Westphalian concept of the state.
So Madison is probably the pivotal person in American history as the scrivener of the Constitution, as the chair of the House of Representatives committee that drafted the Bill of Rights. He believed, we know this from what he said in his retirement, that he gave us a government which was liberty of individuals granting power. It wasn't like in Europe where power, kings reluctantly granted liberty. So in Madison's view, the American system was the inversion of the European view.
Unlike all the strictures imposed on us by states, states themselves are chaotic. States aren't required to follow any rules. There's no rule of law. That's a mythology that we cling to. States can do what they want, and they are the judge of their own actions. They're the judge of their own criminality. They're the judge of their own civil penalties. I mean, this is a bizarre state of affairs where maybe 1% of the population, 3 million or so federal employees, get to dictate to the other 329 million of us how things are going to be. And they're the sole arbiter of their own actions. This, to me, is chaotic.
State education produces people who believe in and perpetuate the state's preferred way of thinking.
The origins of the American education system start in the 19th century with reformers, so-called moral reformers, people like Horace Mann and others, who went to Prussia and found a system of education there that they wanted to emulate in the United States, which they did, and they brought it back here. And they established the modern